The Goose Girl. Once upon a time, in a grand kingdom, there lived a kind and gentle princess named Lyla. She loved walking in the garden, feeding the birds, and talking to the animals. Everyone who met her admired her kindness. One day, her father, the king, called her to the throne room.
"My dear Lyla,"
he said,
"you are ready for a big adventure. You will travel to a faraway kingdom to marry Prince Leo. He is brave, wise, and kind, just like you."
Lila's eyes grew wide.
"Oh, father, I'm nervous. What if the prince doesn't like me?"
The king chuckled.
"How could anyone not like you? Besides, you won't be alone. You'll have your magical horse, Falada, and a maid to help you on the journey."
The next morning, Lyla set off in a golden carriage with Falada trotting beside her.
"I'll take good care of you, princess,"
said Falada. He was a beautiful white horse with a shiny mane and kind eyes. Lyla smiled.
"Thank you, Falada. I feel braver already."
The maid sat beside her, pretending to be helpful. But inside, the maid was jealous.
"Why should she be a princess while I'm just a maid?"
The maid thought. After hours of traveling, Lyla said,
"Maid, could you please fetch me some water from that stream? I'm so thirsty."
The maid frowned.
"Why don't you fetch it yourself? I'm not your servant anymore."
Lyla was shocked.
But I'm the princess." "Not anymore."
The maid snapped.
"If you want me to stay, you'll do as I say."
Lyla had no choice. She climbed down, fetched the water herself, and continued the journey with a heavy heart. As they traveled further, the maid grew even nastier.
"Take off that dress and crown,"
she demanded.
"You'll wear my old clothes, and I'll wear yours." "But why?"
Lyla cried.
"Because if you don't, I'll leave you here all alone."
Falada stomped his hoof angrily.
"You can't do this!"
He neighed. But the maid only sneered.
"Quiet, horse, or you'll regret it."
Lyla didn't want to be left behind, so she did as the maid said. She swapped her beautiful gown for the maid's old dress, and the maid placed the golden crown on her head. When they arrived at Prince Leo's castle, the maid marched inside, pretending to be Princess Lila. The real princess was given an apron and told to help with the geese. From that day on, everyone called her Goose Girl. Lila's new job was to look after the geese, with a boy named Conrad. Every morning, she would lead the flock to the meadow, where the geese waddled and honked happily. Conrad, a cheerful boy who loved to whistle, often teased her.
"Hey, Goose Girl,"
Conrad called one day.
"You're too gentle to be a servant. You treat those geese like they're royalty."
Lyla smiled softly.
"Maybe kindness is all I have left to give,"
she said. While Lyla worked hard, she couldn't help but wonder how the fake princess was behaving in the castle. Surely, she must be struggling to act like a real princess. And Lyla was right. In the grand halls of the palace, the fake princess was causing quite a stir. She thought being a princess meant doing whatever she wanted, without a care in the world. She strutted around in fancy dresses, wore the golden crown, and barked orders at everyone she saw. But it wasn't long before the palace staff realized something was not quite right. At her first royal dinner, she plopped down in her chair, grabbed a turkey leg with her hands, and started chomping away. The servants stared in shock.
"What are you looking at?"
She snapped, her mouth full of food.
bring me more pies. And don't forget the whipped cream.
But, Your Highness, stammered the head butler. A princess usually uses a fork and knife. She waved the turkey leg in the air.
Who has time for that? Just bring me more.
The fake princess wasn't interested in royal duties either. When the prince suggested she visit the townspeople to hear their concerns, she wrinkled her nose.
Ugh, why would I do that?
She groaned.
It's hot outside, and I just got my nails polished.
But the people need their princess, Prince Leo said.
Then they can wait until it's not so sunny,
she replied, fanning herself dramatically. Instead of helping with royal matters, she spent her days lounging in the royal garden, eating cakes and bossing the gardeners around. One night, the fake princess threw a tantrum because her royal bed wasn't soft enough.
This pillow feels like a rock,
she yelled, tossing it across the room. The maid hurried in.
But that's the softest pillow in the kingdom, Your Highness. Not soft enough. Bring me 7 more.
Soon, the entire palace was whispering about her strange behavior.
A real princess would never eat with her hands,
said the cook.
And she wouldn't skip royal meetings to take naps,
said the advisor. Even the palace cats avoided her, meowing in protest when she tried to pet them.
This princess is unusual,
Prince Leo muttered to himself. The prince began to suspect that this princess wasn't royal at all. One afternoon, while Lyla and Conrad were watching the geese, 2 maids passed by, chatting loudly.
Did you hear what the princess did?
One maid said.
She refused to visit the town because it was too sunny. That's nothing,
the other maid replied.
Last night, she made us bring her 7 pillows because her bed wasn't soft enough.
Conrad tilted his head in surprise.
7 pillows? Sounds like someone is living the good life.
But Lyla sighed.
A real princess would care about her people, not just her comfort,
she said. As the maids walked away, Lyla looked down at her plain dress and muddy boots.
Will anyone ever know the truth?
She wondered. Lila's only friend was Falada, who stayed in the stables. Every day, she would visit him secretly and tell him her troubles.
Don't worry, princess,
Falada said.
The truth will come out someday.
But the fake princess grew suspicious. She didn't like seeing Lyla talking to Falada.
That horse knows too much,
she muttered. So she sent Falada to live far away on a farm. Now Lyla felt lonelier than ever, but she didn't give up. She tied a ribbon with tiny bells on the castle gate.
Every time the bells ring, I'll think of you, Falada,
she whispered. Prince Leo was no fool. Ever since the princess had arrived at the castle, something didn't feel right. She was loud and bossy, never smiled at anyone, and always complained.
Is this really the kind princess my father told me about?
He wondered. One day, while walking near the castle gardens, Leo saw the Goose Girl with the geese. She was humming a soft tune and tossing crumbs to the birds. The geese waddled after her happily, and even the shy sparrows flew down to perch near her.
Why is the Goose Girl so kind, while the princess is so not?
He wondered.
Excuse me,
the prince said, stepping closer.
You have such a kind way with animals. What's your name?
The Goose Girl bowed her head.
I am just a servant, Your Highness. My name doesn't matter.
But the prince noticed something in her eyes, something sad and secret.
Why do you speak like someone who's lost something?
He asked gently. Lyla shook her head.
I'm fine, Your Highness. Please excuse me.
And with that, she hurried away, her apron fluttering in the breeze. Later that day, Prince Leo walked by the castle gate and noticed a ribbon tied there with tiny bells jingling in the wind. Curious, he asked the stable boy.
Who tied this here?
The boy scratched his head.
Oh, that was the Goose Girl. She said it reminds her of her horse, Falada. Her horse?
Leo asked.
Yes, Falada. She talks about him all the time, like he's her best friend. She even whispers to the bells, as if he can hear her.
The prince's mind raced.
Why would a simple servant girl speak of a royal horse like that?
He decided he needed to know more. Prince Leo came up with a clever plan. That night, he invited both the Goose Girl and the woman pretending to be the princess to a royal feast. The dining hall glittered with golden candles, and the smell of roasted meat and sweet pies filled the air. As everyone ate, the prince stood and said,
Let me tell you all a story.
The room grew quiet.
Once upon a time,
he began,
there was a kind and gentle princess who set out on a journey to marry a prince. But along the way, her servant betrayed her. The servant stole her clothes, her crown, and her name, and made the real princess work as a servant. The poor princess didn't tell anyone because she was afraid no one would believe her.
The room was silent except for the crackle of the fire. The fake princess laughed nervously.
What an interesting story, Your Highness! And what happened to this so-called servant?
The prince looked her straight in the eye.
I was just about to ask you. What do you think should happen to someone so wicked?
The fake princess smirked.
Oh, she should be punished, of course. Someone like that doesn't deserve mercy.
At that moment, the prince turned to Lyla, who was sitting quietly at the end of the table.
Goose Girl,
he said kindly.
Do you have anything to say about this story?
Lila's cheeks turned pink. She stood up and said softly,
Your Highness, that story is true. I am the real princess. I didn't speak up because I didn't want to cause trouble.
The prince smiled.
I knew it,
he said. He clapped his hands, and the stable boy brought in Falada's saddle and reins.
Here is the proof,
the prince declared.
Falada belonged to Princess Lila, and only she could have known about the bells on the gate.
The fake princess turned pale.
I can explain,
she stammered. But the prince shook his head.
There's nothing to explain. You're no princess. Guards, take her away.
The whole hall cheered as the real Princess Lila was brought forward. The prince knelt before her and said,
Now this is the kind and gentle princess I've been waiting for.
The fake princess was sent away, and Lyla was given her crown and beautiful gown again. They had a grand wedding, with music, dancing, and a feast that lasted for days. Lyla even heard that Falada was living happily on a big, green farm, and that made her smile. From that day on, Lyla and Prince Leo ruled the kingdom with kindness and fairness. And the Goose Girl's story was told for generations.